Welcome everyone. It's January 8th, 8 o'clock. We're going to call our St. Croix Board of Supervisors to order at this time. And this time we'll have our invocation by Tim Sackett, Transport for Christ of Hudson. So everybody stand, please.
Good morning, good morning. As always, I and the rest of the pastors in our county area are thankful for this opportunity to do this. So Happy New Year to everybody. I kind of thought that the new year really couldn't start without me, so I put myself in here. No, actually, I shouldn't be saying that because I think that one of the things that is key to the service that you provide and the way that you provide and the way that we in the county receive the assistance from county supervisors and all the committees and all of the agencies that you oversee, and that is one of the things that is important about all of this is humility. And you know, we just passed the Christmas season, and one of the important themes of Christmas is the humbleness of Jesus being born in the manger, God in the flesh, and that's a major theme of Christmas, is that God humbled himself, and so he's our ultimate pattern for how and who we become when we learn how to humble ourselves to be able to ask you. And many people come to you and ask for assistance and ask for this and that, and they're not very humble about it, and a lot of pride happens. And so I think there's a source of our service that we provide in ministry and the service you provide as county leaders, and one of the main elements that I'm excited about and I look for is humility. And every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock, our pastors gather in Hudson. Our pastors gather for prayer. So as soon as I'm finished here, I'll be going over to join the rest of them in prayer, and everybody here gets lifted up quite often by the clergy on Tuesday mornings at 8 o'clock. So with that, let's pray. Lord God in heaven, we thank you for the perfect, ultimate example of what it means to be able to serve well, for the people to humble themselves to ask for assistance. There are people in our county that are in great need, and they don't want to ask. They want to fix their own problems, but many times it's not possible. So the humility that it takes to be able to ask for assistance, and then for the humility that it takes to provide that. Too many times we could respond and say, you made this problem, you make it go away. And that leads to a prideful problem. So Lord, we're asking for this new year in the chambers of this county board and all their committees and all that they represent, that humility would be a key, that the citizens of St. Croix County would be humble enough to seek whatever assistance is needed and to offer help whenever help is needed, and for the board to provide the assistance necessary. For all the hard work they do, the long hours, poring over numbers and budgets and meetings, we just want to lift them up in prayer that the humility and the peace that we seek will be granted to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Will you please join me in Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Switched.
Thank you again.
Thank you. This time we'll have roll call. And we have Linda Miller's been excused. Villa Livery's been excused, and the other areas are just, we have to be filling some empty spaces, so we'll take care of that at this time. Thank you. Now we're going to have it open for public comment. So if anybody from the public has something they want to talk about on or off the agenda, this is the time we can do that. And it'll be limited to 3 minutes if somebody wants to come up and talk. I haven't seen anything up here, so I'll ask again, is there anybody from the public who wants to talk something on or off the agenda? Anybody on or off the agenda the public wants to talk about? Not seeing anybody. We'll move forward. Thank you. The consent agenda, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Supervisor Coulter, second. Supervisor Hanson. Discussion on the consent agenda. No discussion on the consent agenda, no questions. And we have a motion and a second to approve. We'll vote at this time. And that's all yeses. Thank you. At this time, we have a presentation, I believe. Do we have from Ann Shield from United Way?
Yes, we have one presentation this morning from Ann Searles, who is the Executive Director of the United Way for St. Croix Valley, St. Croix County. And Ann's going to give us a little update on the most recent campaign. Thank you, Ann.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Good morning. It's
Good
nice
morning.
to be here with you. Well, first of all, I want to thank St. Croix County. What a wonderful year. What a wonderful campaign. We raised $10,285. I think everyone should clap. The leadership of Brad Beckman was just amazing, and the enthusiasm engaging all of the St. Croix County employees to support the United Way. It allows us to give back to the community these dollars. It generated a lot of team environment, I heard. I heard the balloons were a success, and it just had such great positive energy for such a great cause. So I want to thank you again, St. Croix County, for your support of the United Way St. Croix Valley campaign and the impact that it has in the community. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Ann. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move forward with our annual reports, and the first one is Emergency Services Department. Steve Koch.
I've had my report put up on the screen for you. Good morning. Happy New Year. I told Pat Thompson yesterday I would try to keep this under 30 to 35 minutes. But I see Roger's got a 3-minute clock. You have our annual report in your written material, so I'm just going to cover a couple of kind of the highlights. As you know, Emergency Services has two divisions, the Emergency Management and the Emergency Communications. Emergency Management is led by Natasha Cardinal, and she has kind of a half-time staff member. The highlights there is they obtained a FEMA pre-disaster mitigation grant of $35,000. This is for a 5-year update to the St. Croix County All Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is required to be updated every 5 years. And the plan evaluates the county's potential exposure to natural disasters, locates areas of risk, assesses vulnerabilities, and develops strategies and actions for reducing those risks to people and property from hazards and their effects. As some of you know, as many of you know, we've had recent flooding in St. Croix County over the last few years as it affected a number of areas. We've had, the city of Hudson's been hit pretty good, as have other places in the county. We've had some culverts washed out and some road damage. And from what they tell us at the National Geological Society, we can expect to see more of this in the future. Emergency management also successfully secured over $18,000 in grants in 2018 to coordinate and support training opportunities for first responders, including EMS, fire, public works, parks, facilities, for hazardous material emergency preparedness. Emergency management also secured over $10,000 from the Wisconsin Disaster Fund for assistance for the following jurisdictions in 2018, including North Hudson, as you'll recall, had a storm hit there, Warren Township, and the village of Hammond. So there are no parts of the county that are immune from being hit by natural disasters. Emergency Communications is led by Terry Anderson and a staff of 16 dispatchers currently, soon to be 17, as the county board has authorized a position for 2019. We thank you for that. It is much appreciated. During the year 2018, the Emergency Communications Center expanded from 4 to 6 completely operational radio 911 console positions to handle current and future demands as calls increase and the population continues to grow. Our emergency medical dispatch protocol, as many of you are familiar with, continues to save lives and is in the upper 90% of operational accuracy and efficiency. The EMD, as we call it, for those of you who don't recall or are not familiar, is a set of protocols that we ask callers before we can get an ambulance on the scene. We can give CPR instructions, we can give other instructions. We don't really give medical advice per se, although we do have something called an aspirin protocol for certain emergencies related to cardiac and such. It's an amazing computerized protocol that each dispatcher has the exact same protocol in front of them. There are 37 different protocols. They range from people who fall, cardiac, strokes, emergency childbirth, which you'll recall we did on the side of a highway last year, and things of that nature. It's very effective, and we score generally in the high 90 percentile range in terms of our operation. The county's mass notification system has been expanded with the addition of a smart 911 app, obviously for the smartphone, and it provides a more user-friendly and superior mass notification product for the dissemination of emergency information and local messages to the public. And finally, the Phase 2 project, which you're familiar with, that is the construction of the communications expansion around the county, is wrapping up. We're putting up our, what we think is our final tower in Holton, which is actually a joint project with Minnesota and Wisconsin authorities. At the county administrator's direction, we have negotiated a long-term, no-cost land lease from the state of Wisconsin to house the tower. We received $300,000 from the state of Minnesota to help construct the tower. And in addition, hopefully maybe next week, we'll be receiving yet another sum of money, this time $100,000 from another government agency in Minnesota to be used for the cost of construction. These partners are all generally public safety agencies: Minnesota State Patrol, Washington County Sheriff's Office, Stillwater Police Department, Stillwater Fire Department. They have the same type of trouble in the river bottom, and hopefully the movement of the tower, they're coming off the King Stack, as are we, to Holton. They'll be able to more effectively cover the east end of Washington County for both the county and the Minnesota State Patrol and the Minnesota Department of Transportation, which actually runs the radio system for the state of Minnesota. So to date, in all of our Phase 2 project, we have about a half a dozen leases for water towers and space and such across the county. We have paid nothing for any of those, and we have received, or will have received, approximately $400,000 in revenue to help us construct this tower in Holton. The Phase 2 project remains under budget. And that kind of sums up where we're at.
Question.
Yes, sir.
For that Smart 911, is it necessary for someone to sign up for it, or is that automatic, or how does that work?
No, you can go online, you can go to our website, and there's a link there, and you'll have to sign up for it, and it just will, you'll be updating information, and then, we don't do weather notifications because there are so many weather apps out there, and we're inundated with weather, and it's very time consuming. But if we had to evacuate an area, if we had a hazmat spill, or the sheriff's department had some type of law enforcement emergency that required us to evacuate an area, that type of information would be sent. But it will be, you will, as a user, need to update it individually.
Any other questions for Steve? That's it. Supervisor Schoberg.
Steve, what keeps you up at night about being concerned about something that could go wrong in the county? Is it maybe trucks traveling down the freeway carrying hazardous chemicals, or are there facilities within the county that have radioactive materials that we're concerned about, or what's your chief concern here? And is it being addressed?
Well, do we have more than 3 minutes? We're in a kind of unique position here in St. Croix County. First of all, you have the nuclear power plant, which we're in the ingestion area within the 50-mile range. We are on a busy interstate highway, so you obviously have the transportation of all kinds of who knows what. I can remember years ago going to a hazmat class, and the instructor said the most dangerous truck on the freeway is a grocery delivery truck, because all the chemicals in there, even though they're separated at the time, if it rolls over and they combine, we've all seen MacGyver take a little of this and a little of that, and it makes a big boom. And they're not marked. A lot of those trucks are not placarded because they either don't carry the quantity or individually their size is such they don't need to be placarded. We have rail going through here. We have pipelines going through here. We have the 9th worst tornado in the United States history was in St. Croix County, in Richmond, 1899, before my time. Some of those guys in the back might have been here, but before my time, 1899 killed quite a few of our residents. So we're prone to so many possible man-made disasters and natural disasters. It's really kind of hard to pinpoint. So from our perspective, it's a combination of emergency management, trying to mitigate some of those risks, and then with a combination of the 911 center to be able to quickly disperse first responders out, contain the situation, whatever it is, whether it's the sheriff's department, fire, EMS, the highway department providing assistance. So I think we want to, because we can't control whatever happens, you obviously can't control the weather, and we have virtually no control over those gas trucks or pipeline or the tanker trucks, tankers on the rail, then we have to come up with an effective responsibility. And that's why when Natasha got grants last year for hazmat, the $18,000 for our firefighters, they're going to be in the line of fire. They're going to be our first responders if one of those tanks rolls over or whatever. So we're trying from the emergency management perspective to ensure that if something happens, our first responders are able to get there and contain it or properly handle it.
Supervisor Hanson.
Mr. Takash, could you talk about how prepared you are for duplicate emergencies? What's your redundancy capacity?
Duplicate?
So when it rains, it pours. Suppose you have just a terrible storm, and at the same time, we have a terrorist thing. Somebody starts to attack a school or something, taking an opportunity. And that's just a wild thought.
Yeah, the dispatch center can get fairly crazy. There was a tour of some of the new members a while back, and that while they were there at the same time, every 911 line was ringing. I don't even recall what the emergency was. They just kind of come and go. I think we do our best to triage, which is, I guess, a term better than not, is that you handle. For example, on a car accident these days, in the old days when you didn't have cell phones, you might get somebody reporting it on a CB radio to the old LeBon's truck stop who called us. Today, you have a car accident, not unusual, down on the Hudson Bridge or something, 20, 30 calls, and you're just picking up the night. And the problem with that is that when you pick up that phone to determine there's an accident at the Hudson Bridge, yeah, we know about that, but you want to make sure there's not another accident in the backup. Because as we've seen, particularly on that Hudson Hill, for those of you who are very familiar with that area, especially during the construction, we have multiple accidents. I think the state said accidents were up 90% over the prior year period. And we had a number of those accidents which resulted in backup accidents. So the dispatchers have to quickly triage that call. What are you reporting? Where are you? And make sure that it matches up. Okay, that's the same call, as opposed to, oh crap, we have another accident in the backup. Same thing happens with fires or other emergencies where you get multiple calls. If you have 3 dispatchers on duty or 4, you just roll with it. Pick it up. Hopefully you can quickly obtain the information and get off the line and get on to the next 911 call. And it's not unusual, like you say, when it rains, it pours. You know, you get bad weather, a snowstorm, something like that. Multiple accidents. Sometimes we've had high-speed chase, CPR instructions in progress, fire at the same time. We manage. I don't know how. They're kind of the unsung and silent heroes down there, but they manage it very well. And they have a good team effort, and they talk to each other. They're in a kind of a bullpen there, as I call it, and they're able to kind of converse quickly. Hey, do you have this? Who's paging fire? You know, who's paging ambulance? They handle it pretty well.
Okay.
Just to follow on, a year ago, we were concerned about staffing. How did your staffing shake out over the past 12 months? You were wanting to add positions, and I'm curious how you handled that and where you're at right now with the number of people you have.
In terms of personnel?
Yeah.
Recruiting, and this is no secret, I've stood up here before and told you, and I'm not the only department head, recruiting has gotten very difficult in the county. Dr. McGrath told us the 3 toughest positions to hire in St. Croix County or any county in the state of Wisconsin are 911 dispatchers, jailers, and road deputies. I don't know what it is, but the young kids just don't want to work nights, weekends, holidays, rotating shifts, or whatever it is. So we have to continue to recruit. We can no longer be passive. We're going to have to be a little more active. We've recruited, we've gotten people, they've come on board, they've worked 6 weeks and then decided this isn't the career they want. When we get up to full staff, we're in pretty good shape. Right now we're at 16. We're just in the process of putting on the county board approved position for 2019. When that person comes on board, and we lost one of our good reserves because we hired them full time. So when we can get up to 17 full-time dispatchers and the 2 reserves, we'll be okay. We won't be great, we'll be okay. Because what happens is, as we know, St. Croix County, when I was a kid here in high school in Somerset, was the fastest growing county in the state of Wisconsin. And I still think it ranks high up there. I know in my neighborhood, they're building houses left and right. So as the population increases, and as what the sheriff's department would tell you and other agencies, the calls increase, that just puts more pressure on the 911 dispatchers. So whoever's standing here at budget time next year, whether it's me or someone else, is probably going to tell you, look ahead. One of the things, you know, we do the capital improvement plan with a 5-year outlook. What maybe we should consider, and I know we've talked about in the county, is looking at potential population forecast figures, and maybe figure, if we're doing a per capita ratio of deputies to population or dispatchers to population, have a plan so that you know, as people who have to take the hard votes on budgets, we're going to have to hire another dispatcher in 2020 or 2021, or hire 2 deputies in 2022, or whatever the case may be. So maybe we need to build something the same way we build a KIP, maybe build something for labor, because it's 80% of our costs.
Any other questions for Supervisor Tatum?
I was just wondering if you could address the issues, concerns, restraints you have listed under emergency management, which is the lack of statewide emergency access to hazardous materials, information for first responders, and then also the reduced grant funding, how you see that affecting services or?
What are you looking for particularly?
Well, I'm wondering why, with a lack of statewide emergency access to hazardous materials, number one, why is that a problem right now? A
You're
lack
talking
of-
about the information?
I would think that information is readily available.
It's
And
not
why-
readily
And why
available.
not? Why wouldn't it be?
You know, the state created a system called Whoppers, and I forget what it stands for. But one of the things I wanted to do, it's for like tier 2 reporting of hazardous material like Uline and GM and such, and other places that have hazmat. And when I was talking to the state, I said, okay, in the future, we have computer-aided dispatch. I think you're probably familiar if you hear it on the scanner, it's on your screen or whatever. And the deputies in the car have a screen and we can send calls back and forth. I want to do that for fire and EMS. We just don't have the modules yet, and it doesn't come cheap. And one of the things I'd like to do is send hazmat information so the firefighters going to Uline know before they get there where's upwind, where's downwind, because they know where it's stored in there. They know what's stored in there. The problem is when I talk to the state, oh, we didn't design the system to do that. So they designed a system for some bureaucratic reason that's not easy to share with the public, as the LEPC folks will tell you, and it's certainly not easy to share with the first responders. So I've kind of hammered on them, you have to create a system that the public can get access to. It's the same way with the sex offender file. You kind of want to know who's in your neighborhood. I think some of us would be frightened to know what's in our neighborhood or what's going through our neighborhood when you talk about the stuff that goes on rails and what keeps me up at night. And there has to be a better system, not just for reporting, because the reporting system isn't all that bad. It could be improved by the people who have the material to the state. But the state, and I hate to use the word failed, but the state doesn't have a good system to get it out to either you as the public or us as the first responders. And, you know, I suppose down the road that's something that we should look at. And, you know, when we're doing resolutions from the county board, maybe one of those, hey guys down in Madison, let's improve on this so that the first responders know exactly what they're getting into. There's a lot of good systems out there as we get more digital age. I mean, you see the information that moves around, but you can only move the information if you have the information. And the problem is the state doesn't have the information in a usable form that they can send to us or send directly to the first responders or that the first responders can directly access. Does that answer?
Any other questions? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Our next annual report is from the Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Knudsen.
Good morning. So I submitted my 2018 annual report. Some of the changes we had over 2018, I guess one of the more visible ones was the body cams that we've outfitted our deputies and our jail staff with. Those seem to be working out well. We've utilized them for review of cases as well as sending information and evidence up to the district attorney's office for cases that have gone up before them. So I think it's a very good system that we have. It's pretty user-friendly. The back end, as I've mentioned to some of you folks in the past, the back end of it is the records retention, not necessarily the records retention, but the open records and fulfilling those records requests, as well as making sure we audit as we go along on a regular basis. We're just getting into that now. We're kind of trying to mirror that with other agencies that have it. How often do they audit? Yearly, quarterly? So there are some challenges and some changes that we're trying to get used to. So that's one of our big patrol changes that's probably most visible to the public. You know, some of our working operations, you know, we've really, in 2018, more of the ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, we've really kind of focused on that since really the kickoff of the Super Bowl in January, so we've really worked on that. And as you saw, we've got 53 cases that have been sent through either DCI, Department of Criminal Investigation, or stuff that we've self-generated. So that's a whole new area. That also brings challenges of media and downloading phones and storage of items and during the investigation. So that we're kind of learning as we go. Lots of good trainings and lots of good deputies that are willing to take on something that really nobody wants to deal with every day, but these guys do it. So in the jail, obviously, you know, we've got, as always, mental health issues. And I hope this year, as we start to move through, we're going to continue to look at some, maybe some additional resources, maybe some additional housing opportunities that we can restructure some things within. Again, working with not a construction crew, but a designing crew to see what we might be able to utilize. I know with Jim Ellsbury, and he's been a great help as well on maneuvering through. We've gone over and toured another facility that we kind of like their setup and how they work. So also within the jail, we have a new jail captain, Chris Dross. Chris was a 22 and still is a 22-year veteran of this agency. He went from court services, also abilities in, or stints in investigations and patrols. So Chris is our new jail captain, and he started December 3rd. So we have some staffing changes as well, and as Mr. Takash mentioned, staffing is, you know, one of our big challenges right now, and it's recruiting and retention. Again, in our climate of working now, the economy is good. So there are many other opportunities for folks to pursue other jobs and other likes. And because of some of the challenges we have with our job, to include scheduling, but as well as some of the hardships and some of the things that have gone on nationally over the last couple of years, it's not as an attractive position as it once was. So we do those challenges right now. We're several people short, several on patrol. We were up to at 1.8 short within the jail, 2 in court services. So at one time we're 12 people down out of 85 sworn. So that's a big hit. You guys now see that reflected in our overtime costs. So instead of me rambling, any questions or any other specific areas that I might be able to answer any questions?
Supervisor Tatum.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could explain the program, the jail-based competency restoration program. I just was reading through, and there's some terminology in there that I'm not familiar with.
I'll see if I'm familiar with that terminology as well. So, as I basically understand, it's through the department, through DHS, and that's through the state. So if somebody is deemed incompetent by the courts, they, for whatever reason, if a crime is committed either outside of or within the jail, they go down and they are evaluated at the hospital in Mendota. If they are deemed incompetent, there's not necessarily a spot for them at that time, because there's a waiting list. So then they come back to the jail and they sit in the jail. We have people that are on waiting lists, they're number 71. And so we have them for months while deemed incompetent before they can get down there to get their treatment. So while they're here, there's this jail-based competency. What that starts the process of their treatment, whether it be medication or counseling. It's picked up by the state, part of their program. So then when the spot opens up, we're already ahead of the game. They've already had maybe months of some treatment. So once they get down there, they're, again, ahead of the game. Medication's on board. We try to get them back to their competency, if possible. So this really gives us a good starting point of not wasting all that time, months. Plus, when they're in the jail and they're deemed incompetent, that's where we have our issues. We have our fights, we have our placement issues. And when deemed incompetent, when they do things criminally or, staff assaults, where we've had those that are deemed incompetent, that we have had staff assaults, staff has been injured. There's no accountability because they're deemed incompetent. So this helps us within the facility as well, make a safer environment for our folks to work in, getting those people some help while they're here. Does that help with any of that terminology? Not terminology, but the process.
Supervisor Oxroth.
Yeah, actually, I have two questions. The
Yes.
first one is about I probably do with the courts where you use the lock and load, but I know in previous years, there has been a lot of time having been put forth just in transportation. And I noticed reading in here, the number of patrol have not gone up at all. And if they're doing more transporting, how is that financially hitting you, and how much less is it or more is it for each transport by lock and load? But that might be hard because of distance. So how is that area doing? Because I know it was a kind of a money pit before.
It is, and it still is. It does tax our resources, and it's got that ripple effect. So if we need to pull one off patrol, that means we either work short on patrol or we backfill, which will impact overtime. And if we work short, that ripple effect goes from anywhere from an officer safety issue of backing up or a citizen safety issue of our time to respond. So that's where that ripple effect happens. So it is a drain on that staff, but it's also a drain on the court services because, again, a lot of our court services have picked up those transports as well. That then takes resources away from this building, as well as tending to the courts. Now, again, tending to the courts is number one. Front door screening, I mean, those are areas that we have people. But as far as, to and from and moving people around, sometimes that takes a little more time.
Do you see anything being done to rectify it or make it a little bit better?
That goes back to those transports and that mental health crisis.
No.
Many of the transports, though, are done. So we do not use lock and load for transports from an original. If we go to a house and somebody is chaptered, that's a deputy taking them down. We never use lock and load for that. So that will always pull somebody off of the road, either one shift or two shifts. And again, because of the length, it's always probably two people. Lock and load will be utilized to bring back some of those mental health, if compliant, because they're not there to fight with people either. So if they're compliant and back to court, we'll utilize lock and load. And in years past, we had a larger auxiliary staff that we could tap into. Now back to this retention and getting people to work. Now our auxiliary to do these transports, it's called at 2 in the morning. Hey, we need you to run on a 10-hour trip. Well, if people have other jobs and their part-time job is this, and then they get their 1 weekend off a month or 2 weekends off a month, they don't want to be doing transports all week. So it is difficult. And if we get some people fresh out of recruit school to do transports or work auxiliary, they're looking for another job elsewhere. This is really just a spot to get going. So that's kind of where our struggle is, where we had some very reliable auxiliary in the past that were here for years. They retired and moved on. That's really where we're seeing our big impact of availability. So we've had to go to lock and load. Now there's others. We've got a couple more auxiliary that want to come on, of retiree officers from around the area. So we're hoping that we'll reduce some of that. But lock and load is still, for us, needed. But it does have an impact.
Okay. And my second area is, can you tell us, for those who don't know and don't realize that the K-9 unit uses no money, but can you tell us a little bit, fill us in on what's been happening there?
We're pretty fortunate. We've had some, the K-9 program started in '97, actually under Paul Birch. And from that time, Paul never, in order to get it going, he didn't have any county funds or taxpayer funds to use it. It was all through donations. And we've kind of held that line. It's getting more difficult to juggle some of that because we do have 3 dogs. And each dog costs about $7,500, $8,000 training. So there's an investment of, with equipment and everything else, $15,000, $20,000 when we do dogs. But we've had some great fundraising. We do a golf tournament in the fall. We've had some private donors that have stepped up with some wonderful donations to the program. So thus far, and we're doing the calendars now, the calendars also as a fundraiser. So it's, and we like to get them out there. We're doing demos with these dogs. They were a county market for the Salvation Army. So the more we can get them out there and get them in front of folks, the better we are.
Supervisor Hanson.
Just real quick, could you talk about your river operations? Have you ordered a new boat, and where are you in that process, and how are things going on the water?
The water's busy, as you saw. This was probably the first year out of many that I put in there any water patrol activities, and we remain very active out there. You know, we work alongside and train with Washington County, the DNR. Coast Guard is also out there as part of that, as well as the National Parks and Wildlife. So there's some resources out there that we can lean on, but it's very busy out there. The boat has been ordered. Actually, I just met with our boat deputy, Chase Durand, this morning. They're going to do a pre-build meeting the week of the 20th, I think the 22nd. So we're getting things going there. We're really looking forward to getting that out, you know, as well as a boat that is built better for the river. That also has an impact on how these guys on the boat all day, hitting those waves, and, you know, just some of the things that'll help them in their backs stay a little more healthy. We're looking forward to that as well.
Any other questions for Sheriff Knutson? Not seeing any. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, guys.
This time, the county administrator's report, we'll turn it over to Administrator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Members of the board, in your packet, you have the financial monthly report through the end of November 2018. It does not reflect year-end at this point, but all the departments for in the general fund are within budget, the expenditures and revenues. I didn't see any of the 5 oversight agencies experiencing any issues. So we'll have preliminary year-end financial information next month, and then the month after that we'll have pre-audit final figures for 2018. But at this point, all the departments look like they will be within budget for 2018.
Thank you.
So,
any questions?
Looks pretty good.
Supervisor Calder.
Yeah, no, does that mean we recovered in HHS? Because last HHS meeting, we were talking about $533,000 shortfall.
If there is a shortfall within the Health and Human Services Fund, they have a fund balance that does not rely on the general fund. So if there is an overage within Health and Human Services, they have adequate fund balance that would be able to cover that.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, one other issue, this is not related to the financial report, but those board members that have served on the Health and Human Services Board, probably familiar with Deb Rasmussen, who was our citizen appointment to the Health and Human Services Board. She recently passed away. I believe it was on December 30th. She was a RN and represented the nursing component of Health and Human Services. She was on the board when I started in 2011 on Health and Human Services. So she's a longtime board member, but just thought the board should know that she recently passed.
Supervisor Hanson.
I think it'd be appropriate for us to send a card or something.
We could do that, and Fred Johnson is in the back. I don't know if the Health and Human Services Department recognized it. You did? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move forward with our business items. Thank you. Thank you. First one is the appointment of County Board Supervisors for District 6. And we have 3 candidates. We had 4, one withdrew this morning for personal reasons. And so to be fair with everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to have Cindy draw a name out of here, and that'll be the person that'll speak first. Cindy can draw it. Just have her, or you can, if Cindy can draw it. Good.
Okay. First to speak is Gregory Sarno, and second will be Buck Malik, and then Tim Hall.
Well, good morning.
Good morning, Greg.
My name is Greg Sarno, as Cindy said. I would like to thank the St. Croix County Board Chair and all of you St. Croix County Supervisors for your time and consideration this morning. It is an honor to be here. I'm going to take a few minutes today to tell you why my family lives in St. Croix County, a little bit about my personal and business background, and what I hope to contribute as a member of the St. Croix County Board. I was born and raised in the New York City metropolitan area. Yes, I'm a Yankees fan, but I'm also a Packer fan. It's kind of complicated. In 1986, I had the good fortune to meet a wonderful young lady from the city of Hudson who eventually agreed to marry me. We moved to St. Croix County from Chicago in 1991 to be closer to family, and we've stayed for 27 years. We have 2 sons who both graduated from Hudson High School. The older one now is currently a pilot in the Air Force, while his younger brother recently completed 4 years of active duty in the U.S. Navy. So why have we stayed in St. Croix County? And the answer to that is very easy. Location, location, location. 30 minutes to the west are the Twin Cities with world-class sports, the arts, retail, manufacturing, and transportation. And 30 minutes in any direction are scenic rivers, trout streams, fishing, hunting, golfing, fresh air, local theater, fairs and festivals, first-class schools and colleges, animals I never saw growing up because they were only in books, and friendly people. Lots of friendly people. Over these 27 years, we've belonged to many outstanding local organizations. We were members of the Hockey Association for almost 15 years. My wife was a team manager, and I drove the Zamboni. That's still the best job I've ever had. I was also chair of the Arena Management Board for several years, planning the maintenance on the buildings and the 2 ice sheets. We were also part of the Hudson Booster Baseball program here in town. Again, my wife was a team manager, while I made sure the kids learned a few things about baseball and had fun at the same time. I'm a very active member of the Knights of Columbus at St. Patrick Church in Hudson, and I currently serve on the City of Hudson's Police and Fire Commission. I also volunteer at the Armed Forces Service Center at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. This is a private USO-type organization that provides food and drink, sleeping facilities, and a friendly face at no cost to active duty and retired military personnel and their families. I have a degree in chemical engineering and was a certified hazardous materials manager for 20 years. The majority of my professional career has been environmental compliance, and I occasionally get my hands dirty from time to time. I work with mid-sized manufacturers such as aluminum anodizers and steel foundries to keep them more than compliant with the constantly changing federal and state regulations. My work includes air emission reporting, wastewater and stormwater flow minimization, hazardous waste management and transportation, emergency spill planning with local authorities, and employee training. These projects require tight planning and constant communication to stay on schedule and budget. St. Croix County must spend its money wisely, and I know my engineering background will help to serve District 6 and the St. Croix County Board at those goals, or achieve these goals. As a new member of the St. Croix County Board, I would focus on several things. First, I will work to ensure that St. Croix County law enforcement has the tools to succeed and be successful. As a member of the Health and Human Services Board, which District 6 would be part of, I will first listen and learn before I act, and then continue to fight against the opioid crisis. The goal that all sectors of our local economy succeed, whether it be agriculture, manufacturing, education, or commercial services. This may require updating our infrastructure, for example, or it might mean staying out of the way and doing nothing. Based on my work background, I am very interested in the environmental issues affecting St. Croix County. I will work to improve solid waste reduction and recycling efforts through education and cooperation. We're doing a very good job now, but I know we can do a little more. I will work to maintain groundwater quality for all users, both agricultural and homeowners. I will work to minimize the effects of stormwater runoff to our surface waters. And I will work to keep the unique characteristics that make St. Croix County such a great place to live and work. Thank you again for your consideration, and at this time I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Greg? For Greg? Not seeing any. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you.
Good morning, supervisors. It's always a pleasure to be with you. This one's a little bit more complex, I guess, because I'm asking for something. I'd like to represent District 6 again. I represent the district from 90 to 94 and from 2000 to 2014. I still have about 150 business cards left from the last time, and if the email addresses are still being assigned the same way, I guess there'd be no need to reprint them for the remaining 15 months or whatever the appointment would be for. I'd like to just highlight a few things. I've already sent you a couple of pieces of paper, and I assume you looked at them. I did start attending meetings of the Health and Human Services Board in order to try to find out what the current issues are. It's not a committee that I was previously on, although I used to attend the meetings at least half the time, simply because it's such a very important board. And during the time that I was on, there were hot issues frequently coming up. So I think I can get up to speed pretty quickly with respect to that board. I've done a number of things that specifically relate to that board. Council on Aging, ARP Tax Aid, Hudson Senior Center Board, Guardian Ad Litem, and I currently do some things that are pertinent to it. I've been organizing and leading kids fishing events. We have a couple ice fishing events coming up in the next few weeks here. That's on behalf of kids, of course, and urban kids who don't have parents that can teach them to fish are our primary target that we're trying to affect. So that's a good thing. It works with the County Sportsmen's Alliance. That's one of the feet on the grounds things that we do for the Alliance, with the Alliance. I grew up in Stevens Point and lived there until I was 19, and then I went away to college for the last 2 years. My father was a sheet metal man, and so we were kind of middle class, and so that's why I stayed in Stevens Point and went to the local college as long as I could, but they didn't have an engineering program, so I had to leave Stevens Point to become an engineer. So I went to MIT and I got my mechanical engineering degree from MIT. And then the Vietnam era was on. At that particular time, a person could avoid military service simply by being married. Now, I don't know if that was peculiar to Portage County, Wisconsin, or was everywhere, but my fiance and I came very close to taking that route. But I decided that
I didn't want to, that was not the patriotic approach. And so I enlisted for 4 years in the Navy, went to officer candidate school, succeeded with that, and then I was an officer in the Civil Engineer Corps, which is like public works, the roads and streets and plumbing and buildings and things like that. That got me enough months of the GI Bill stuff that I could go to law school, which wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And then I went to Harvard Law School and came out of that environment. I don't come to you with an agenda as such. I mean, I haven't developed a list of things that I would like to accomplish, but I do have some principles that I think I'd like to not necessarily suggest they're the principles you should adopt, but they're principles that work for me in government service and particularly in county service. One of those is to remember that practically every dollar we spend is a dollar we've taken from someone who didn't contribute it voluntarily, like they might give to a nonprofit or a charity. They paid their taxes because they had to pay their taxes. Most of the money we spend comes from that kind of source. I think that's important to remember. Because it has to do with our fiduciary duties to manage the money well. And one of the other principles that seems to work for me is that government works best when the problems that government addresses are addressed at the level of government closest to the people that can do it. So if a matter can be handled at the town level, it should be handled at the town level, I think, not, for example, at the county level. If a matter can be handled at the county level rather than the state level, that's where it ought to be. Government closest to the people when it has the competence, the ability, the scope, etc., to make it work. Another principle is that most of what we decide at the county level is marginal, is not in the sense that it's not important, in the sense that we are incrementally doing something. We're adding another employee. We're putting out buying another truck, or whatever. It's incremental. That means that we have to really keep our eyes on what's happening, it seems to me, because without noticing it, we can make quite a drift or a shift if we aren't paying attention to what's happening at the margins. I've always been a great fan of local business. I spent 18 years as a corporate lawyer, working in-house most of that time as like the Corporation Counsel does for the county, being a lawyer on the staff. And so I naturally come from a business orientation. My father had his small business. My other relatives had a plumbing business. That's just where I start. I was one of the founders of the Hudson Area Development Corporation back in 1992. There was just a gap in what was available in this area. It sort of morphed since then into the County Economic Development Corporation, and I think that's very important. In our particular area, and Linda and I have been here since 1979 and raised our children who are now gone, we chose to stay here primarily because of quality of life. That I know that covers an awful lot, but it's represented, as Greg said, by things that feed into the tourism business. And tourism is very important as an economic driver in our area, but it only works if we have something that attracts people from outside to come here, whether it's cultural or it's environmental or other aspects, historical. So we need to preserve and highlight and emphasize
those things. I've recently got involved with a group that's awfully ambitious, but we think we can make a difference in a heritage area movement, which driving tourism by bringing people in from around the world to savor or enjoy temporarily what we've got here, leave their money and go home, is an appropriate thing. So I'd like the opportunity to join you. I ask you for your vote. And of course, I'll answer any questions that aren't too embarrassing.
Anybody have any questions for Buck?
Thanks for your attention.
Not seeing any. Thank you, Buck.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Hall, and I'd like to thank you all for accepting my application for the position of District 6. I want to talk a little bit about who I am, what I've done in my life, and what my thoughts are on where I could potentially help on the county board. So first of all, my wife and I, my wife is Joyce Hall, moved to the area after being in southern Wisconsin for 15 years in 2007. We had a variety of options of where we could have lived. My work is basically airport-based, so we could have been anywhere within commuting distance of MSP. We had, as previous residents of North St. Paul, Minnesota, often come over to Hudson for the recreational opportunities. I love to trout fish. We go for hikes. My kids love to play in the parks. So we were familiar with the area, and when we had the opportunity, we said, this is the place we want to come to. Well, why? The things that Glenn and Buck have already mentioned. This is a great place to live. It's got good environmental qualities, clean air, clean water, friendly people, and it's welcoming. So when we chose to move back here and set down roots, we both decided that it was also a time in our life when we could start giving back a little bit more for all of the help that we had both received as citizens of different areas growing up. I firmly believe nobody gets to any level in life without the assistance of other people around them. That can be community-based, and it can also be governmentally based. There are tools and opportunities for everyone out there, and I want to help preserve those opportunities. So, my background, I am an engineer by training, a business person by experience. I work for an engineering consulting services firm, and as such manage projects both in the United States and internationally for large intelligent transportation systems and other computer-related networking jobs. In that capacity, I have to work with a variety of different people, governmental agencies, and also employees, come together to deliver a product that comes out on time and on budget. And that usually happens only when you have worked with everybody involved, solved all the specific problems, and brought together a solution that everyone can agree on and get behind. And that would be the approach that I would present to the county that I would like to bring. As far as the priorities that I campaigned on, I ran for this position against Mr. Long in the last election cycle and lost by 10 votes. And my wife always tells me, the question is did you knock on 10 doors too many or 10 doors not enough? So, you know, I keep that in mind. So I think there is significant support within the community for, you know, my candidacy from that side of things. And finally, the things that I think are important, there are challenges and there are opportunities that are going to be facing the county as we go forward. The biggest ones that we've all discussed, Glenn has already brought them up, Buck has touched on them. We have a drug crisis in the county that needs to be addressed and properly spoken to. We have groundwater and surface water contamination potentials that we need to be aware of. We have a growing population that is going to need to have services provided, and so that means that with those people needs to come sustainable business opportunities and economic development. I would work to make sure that we brought in, where we can, and support high-quality jobs that would help support our tax base. I would also, for those people coming in, want to make sure that our county maintains a welcoming and appreciative approach to the skills, talents, and cultural differences that they bring. I'm all in favor of being inclusive. The nature of St. Croix County as we bring in new medical resources, et cetera, is not going to be what we have all been accustomed to seeing over the years. I've worked in diverse environments. I know that diversity brings strength. The final thing is there is a contentious issue up in my district, particularly District 6, and that's the library. My approach would be on that to listen carefully to the facts, but to take the approach that we would solve the library issue in the way that best benefits the people of the whole county in that case. Now that brings me to the most difficult thing that I have to say, and that is I ran hard for this position. I worked my butt off to try and get it, and I lost, but that's fine. But now today, I also found out at my work life that the good news is I received a promotion. The bad news is it will now engender significantly much more travel than I've been doing, which is a lot already. And I also have listened to the two candidates before me, and particularly Buck Malik, who I think brings to this position something unique that of the three of us, and that's experience in the role. I've known Buck for a number of years now. I consider him to be a friend and somebody who I agree with in principle on most of what he says. And so I'm going to ask to be withdrawn as a candidate for consideration for this position at this time, although I do reserve the right to run again in the next election cycle. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim. At this time, we have to vote on a candidate, and we're down to two candidates, I guess, so. And I'm going to have our corp counsel explain the voting.
So my presentation was premised on three candidates, but I'm flexible. So the rules provide that the board chair forwards the candidates that are eligible for that are qualified electors. There were three candidates, and now there are two. The county clerk will distribute written ballots, and I suggest that the ballots that she's prepared would be sufficient. I think it has three names, right, Cindy? And
It is, but I can quickly print other ones if you prefer.
so a ballot will be delivered to each county board member present, and you can only vote for one candidate, either or. The ballots have to be signed to be valid. And you have to indicate your district number on the ballots. The candidate that receives the majority is the winner. So the more complicated rules about if there are a plurality and what do we do from there, we need not entertain because there are only two candidates. So the county clerk is proposing to reprint the ballots, and we could take a break at this time, yeah.
I actually just sent it to the printers, so.
Oh, okay.
If you want to copy 7, well, they'll be ready.
Who's going to do the counting?
After the vote. We're going to take a break after the vote because they need some time to swear the candidate in and get them set up, so whoever it is. So after the vote, we'll take a break.
Have been distributed.
We need everybody back, so the ballots have been distributed, so we can get the vote completed.
They do know they have to sign them, right?
What do you think? We have the totals back on the election now, and Buck Malik got 10 votes, Gregor Serrano got 4. So congratulations to Buck for the appointment. And I want to thank all the candidates that came in. I really appreciate their coming in and working and talking to me at the time we did. And don't be afraid to come back again sometime. So thank you all. And at this time, if there's no problem, we'll take a 10-minute break just so that they can swear the person in, Buck in. We have our new supervisor back with us, so we're going to call our meeting back to order so we can move forward.
Cindy needs a minute. Cindy needs a minute.
A minute? Everybody? Everybody vote.
Come on, Buck. Come on, Buck.
Do you remember how to do it? I think these are new.
Welcome, Supervisor Malik. So, so our next business item is the resolution approving labor agreement between St. Croix County and Local 453 of the Wisconsin Professional Police Association's Law Enforcement Employees Relations Division for 2019 through 21. I need a motion to Supervisor Peterson. I need a second. Supervisor Motatum. Discussion. Everybody knows what it is. So if there's no discussion, as soon as you get the second up there, we have the motion, the second. If there's no discussion, we'll vote. And that's all yeses. Thank you. Our number 3 item is a resolution supporting lake protection grant for St. Croix River watershed and TMDL implementation. I have a Supervisor Hanson. Do I have a second? Supervisor Schoberg. Discussion on that. No discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor with no discussion. We'll vote. And that's all yeses. Thank you. The 4th business item, resolution to adopt the St. Croix County Outdoor Recreation Plan 2019 to 2023. I have a motion. Supervisor Achterhoff, second Supervisor Hanson. Discussion on that. As soon as we get the motion second up there. Supervisor Peavy.
I just have one comment that surprised me. I think I made every public hearing and informational meeting, and when I found, when I went online and found the packet, and of course, since this regards to Wildwood Trail, which just happens to be right outside my front door, there is a new section, proposed trail, that I never saw before. It's on the map. In this case, if anybody wants to try to scroll through, it's on package page 210. Anyway, this shows a proposed trail down 2 Town of O'Galley roads. The Town of O'Galley was never contacted, and since I'm town clerk, I was aware of any formal information. I actually called Jim Lund, town chairman. He was never contacted. And I think this is unfair to the town. We're encouraging people to go down roads that the Town of O'Galley has never authorized. I realize people can bike on every public road they want. These are narrow town roads. The section on 10th Avenue is highly traveled with agricultural equipment. And Supervisor Schachner and Supervisor down here, can't think of names, realize farm equipment and narrow town roads don't work together. And to say the least, I was very disappointed that that road got on here without formal, even mentioning to the town that this was going to show up. So if I missed it at a previous meeting, I apologize, but I think I went to every meeting, and I just disappointed that that showed up without the town being involved in any way, shape, or form. Second comment I want to make is that when we do get to a formal vote on this, I will be abstaining. I think the section that deals with the Wildwood Trail has direct financial impact me, my wife, and my children. So to avoid a conflict of interest, when the vote comes, I will be abstaining. Thank you.
Supervisor Hanson.
So, talking about the Wildwood Trail, I'm sorry that you didn't see it before, but it's part of the bike ped plan, and we've been talking about that. Although it's a very small section of road, it's connecting the Wildwood Trail to the Ogali Recreation Area is important for tourism. I understand that there is the potential for agricultural equipment on that road, and I know what farm it comes from, Bill, and it's productive and it's a good farm, and there are good people down there. But I'm a duffer. I'm not a great bicyclist, but I have ridden the Wildwood Trail, and I have hauled my bike up that embankment and onto the St. Croix Polk Road and on into the rec area, the Ogali rec area, and it's just a beautiful area. And it's a nice idea, not just a nice idea, but it's a beautiful day to ride your bicycle down the Wildwood Trail, which is an old railroad trail. All of the tops of the hills were knocked down and filled in the valleys, and you don't have to take all those hills, and it takes you off of County Road Highway B, which is terribly hilly, and it really is beautiful, and it's a short run, less than 2 miles over to Ogali. I'm sorry that you feel it's unfair, and I'm sorry to address another supervisor here, but I hate the fact that a town chair thinks this is unfair, and I'd like to continue the conversation in other ways. But I hope you don't think that this is a reason to hold up this plan. It's an excellent plan, and it needs to be incorporated into our comprehensive plan. So we will work with the town chair, and we will try to grow bicycle tourism in St. Croix County because it is a proven generator of economic development everywhere where it's developed. And I hope that you will vote for this plan. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Coulter.
Yeah, I voted against this plan in committee, and one of my big objections was the fact that all the financial information is sprinkled throughout many pages, and I asked that that information be consolidated into a section that addressed all the financial implications in terms of whether they're going to be grant applied or budget applied, et cetera. Further, the bike plan is smack dab in the middle of this, and I've voted against that every opportunity I have. One of the things that I object to in it is that we initially we had 110 miles of bike path proposed for what is now private property, and our initial estimate was that each of those miles was going to cost $650,000 per mile to acquire and construct. Well, in the meantime, the legislature and the governor signed a bill to prohibit us from using eminent domain to acquire property for bike paths, which I think is wonderful because I think we should have willing sellers for that property, not condemned property. But in the meantime, early last year, the county, after many pronouncements that we weren't going to use eminent domain, initiated some eminent domain proceedings against some property owners in New Richmond for acquiring property for a bike path. So if you add up the 110 miles, that's $70 million. So I just at $650,000 a mile. So at any rate, I have to vote against this, and I think it's ill-conceived and ill-advised.
Supervisor Akhtarov.
One, I'm for this, and I also, a lot of the information that people have spoken about is proposed. You have to have a plan. You don't know necessarily whether you're going to go there or not, but there has to be a plan, and one of the reasons there should be a plan is a lot of other towns, villages, associations, whatnot, want and need grants to help them do what they want to do. If we do not have this plan, they cannot get the grants. And most of what everybody's been talking about that they're leery of is proposed, which means it is not definite, not finite. But if we reject this plan, we are hurting a lot of other people in this county because they will be unable to get any kind of the financing that they need to carry on some of their business.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Hanson?
I'd just like to correct the timing on that. What Supervisor Coulter said, the situation in Richmond had been applied for long before the law was changed regarding eminent domain. And that the trail in New Richmond was to provide a pedestrian path that would allow children in a housing development, Peninsula Heights. There's approximately 70 residences there, and many school children who do not have a safe route to school where they can walk without going on, what is it, 140th? The backside, there's a path that goes down through a ravine that's extraordinarily steep. It's icy in the winter. There's no paved path. It's a red herring to say that there is a path, a safe way to school there, because my children lived 3 houses down from that gully, which is not a path, or it'll show up on a map as a road. It's a absolute travesty that they allow that to be called a path. So it's tragic to me that that project was killed, and to say that that was planned after that law was passed is simply not true. So please pass our plan. It's necessary so that we can apply for grants, and there's nothing nefarious going on here. We want to promote tourism. We want to promote a healthy community, and that's where this work is headed. Thank you.
Any other discussion before we vote? No questions. So at this time, we have a motion and a second. We'll vote. 3 noes and abstain. It passes, so it'll move forward. So thank you, everyone. Request for further agenda items. If anybody has future agenda items, they can get them to myself, Cindy, or Pat Thompson, our administrator, if somebody has something today. Okay, Schoberg.
Just a reminder, the Administration Committee is now reviewing the rules and bylaws. It's something we usually act on every spring, so it will come up at the next couple Administrative Committee meetings. So just a kind of a heads up to all of you supervisors, if you're hearing or if you know of some concerns you have with the present state of the bylaws, let us know.
Okay, thank you. Seeing nothing else, we'll move forward to the county clerk's report.
Just a couple things. I have posted and published, or will be publishing, the District 2 vacancy. You should have received notice on that, and it's been distributed to the Town of St. Joe chair and Town of Somerset chair as well. So just so you're aware of that, and it should be published in the Hudson Star Observer and Richmond News next week, I believe. Couple things. I did send a reminder out regarding campaign finance to those who are not exempt from filing campaign finance reports. Your January continuing report is due January 15th. For those who have claimed exemption, you still have to file a re-verification of your exemption. And I do have the forms here. If you want to fill it out today, you may do that. It's just a short form, and it was included in your email. So that's just a reminder for you to file that. And then also a few more people need to pay on the refreshment flower fund. If you need to know who you are, let me know. That's it.
Okay. Any questions for Cindy? Not, we'll move forward. Announcements, anybody? No announcements? Well then, thank you everyone for a good meeting, and enjoy. We're adjourned.